Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today's video is kind of a fun one. I had planned to do this in March because I had filmed and asked for your input on the worst trends in romance. And that was a very popular video because, you know, we all have opinions on the trends that are in romance right now and where they're headed and things that we don't like. And I know I've definitely been very vocal about those things, you know, so that was a really fun video. I had such a response to that I was going to do a part 2. And then, you know, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I kind of don't want to do another really negative video because I felt like I covered a lot of the high points. So instead, I asked you on Instagram for the best romance trends that you have seen and what they were. So the interesting thing is that I don't feel like I got as big of a response when I asked about the best romance trends, but I did get some good ones. So I'm going to react to them and I'm going to give you my opinion on them, and let's go ahead and get into it. So one that came up over and over and over again, which I absolutely loved, is diversity and representation for all, more diverse main characters, inclusive historical romance. And I absolutely agree. I think obviously anytime that we have more diverse characters, more diverse romances, that's obviously a wonderful thing. But I specifically wanted to talk a little bit about the diverse or inclusive historical romance because that's a trend that I've noticed too. As somebody who reads a lot of historical romance, I think specifically last year in 2022, there were so many really excellent diverse historicals that were coming out. A Lady for a Duke was one with a trans heroine, which is that was one of my favorite books of the year. I've been thinking about rereading that. Beverly Jenkins obviously is always writing wonderfully, beautifully diverse romances with her Black love, and I absolutely loved the Raven book that came out. I thought that was really, really great. This is a new one by J.J. McAvoy. It's not brand new, it's new to me. I think this came out last year. This is on my radar. I want to get to this soon. This is a historical romance with Black love in it as well, and I'm super duper excited about that. And then I think going back to, I can't remember if this book was released in 2020 or was it 2021? But this one by Courtney Milan, which had a cast of Asian characters in a historical romance setting, which I loved that book. I thought it was so sweet, it was very low angst, but the characters in there were great. I loved the diversity, and I just really, really loved their romance. That hero is such a cinnamon roll, and I adored him. And I love that this is something that is a trend, and I love that this was mentioned so many times when I asked this on Instagram. So if you know of more diverse historical romances that I haven't mentioned, please feel free to leave them in the comments because I would love that, and then we can all have more recommendations. So that one was a great one. So another one that was mentioned is that clinch covers are coming back. And I have noticed, I'm going to put this one up here, this Melanie Harlow. This was a cover that Hello Lovely Box did, which I really, really love. But also I want to show this Julie Anne Long clinch cover, which I think is absolutely stunning. I think it is super duper steamy, and I just love this cover. And I have noticed that a lot of our historical romances that we are getting are definitely going back to this type of cover, which makes me so, so happy. Instead of, it felt like for a time, historical specifically published by like Avon and things like that, it seemed like they were treading into the illustrated cover area, and I was like, please don't do that. And I know you all were too. So I'm very happy that it looks like we are definitely getting more clinch covers. I know Ava Leigh has great clinch covers, like hers are so beautiful. And if I can think of more, as I'm editing this, I'll put a few covers up here for other covers I've noticed that are clinch that are just stunning. So I think there is one I'm thinking of. I don't remember the author, but if I can find it, I'll put it here. If not, there's a unicorn. Anyway, okay. So something else that was mentioned several times that I really, really liked is the importance of consent. Let's see, this was mentioned several times. Consent with like 6 exclamation points after it. And then again, just consent. So this is something that was mentioned so often, and I definitely agree with this. I think something that authors that I've noticed a lot of authors doing in their romances. And I think that this goes both with indie and traditionally published, depending on what type of indie romance you're reading. I mean, obviously, I think if you're picking up something that's a dark romance, you kind of are going to need to expect that consent is going to be blurry at best, you know? But I have noticed that the way that the authors are portraying consent in their relationships seems to be much more obvious, but not in a real ham-fisted way, you know? I think there was a scene in, if I'm remembering correctly, in The Right Move, one of the love scenes, which I loved so much, where it was so very obvious that the hero was asking for consent, but it wasn't by vocally expressing it. Like, there was, but the author was making sure it was clear. There was eye contact, there was a question, he was hesitating, and then when the heroine, like, nodded or said yes, or expressed that she was absolutely on board, then he proceeded. And I loved that so much, because I think, you know, one of the arguments I've heard against a lot of this is people are like, well, if you have to have a conversation about it, it kind of ruins the moment. In fiction, obviously we're talking about fiction, but I feel like, so I think that some authors are getting more creative about how they're including consent. Sometimes it is outright explicitly stated, which is wonderful, and other times it feels like the author's really doing a lot of work to make sure the reader knows that, hey, this is a moment of consent, he's checking in with her, he's making sure that she's okay with him, and I love that. So I absolutely agree. This is a huge one for me. I love it so much. And like I said, unless I'm going into a dark romance where I'm expecting there to be dubious consent, you know, I want there to be clear consent happening. Or if I'm reading like a Bodice Ripper or an old school historical where they're using consent in a different way to really show what is happening at the time, how these women are affected, or they're telling a story about violence and lack of consent, you know, which also hedges into the dark romance area, which I could do a full video on Bodice Rippers versus dark romance, which I've thought about doing a lot of times. If you want that, let me know down below. But anyway, that's something that I also agree with, is consent. Absolutely. We love to see it so much. Okay, another one is praise. I loved this. I think that this has definitely gained a huge chokehold on readers. Praise, worshiping heroes all day, every day. I love that as well. That's like a favorite, absolute favorite thing that I look for in romance. It's not necessarily something I look for, but if I know it's in a book and it's done well, I'll definitely pick it up. Praise, worshiping heroes, like, yes, absolutely agree with this one. Another one is, I love a good found family in a romance or a romance series, and I feel like we are getting that as well. We're getting a lot of really close-knit family groups again. I think this is a trend that has always been around in romance, but I'm also seeing this happen more in indie romances as well, instead of just, I feel like it's such a traditional part of traditionally published romances where you have a family and each book has like brother, sister, whatever, which is wonderful. But the found family element of that, where they maybe find each other and they form this group and then each character gets a romance, like, I love that so much. I actually can't think of any off the top of my head that do that in a series, but I love a good found family romance, and I mean, Wolfsong is one of my all-time favorites, and also Love at First is a fantastic found family romance, and yeah, there are wonderful ones out there for sure. Okay, another one is Touch Her and You Die. This one is definitely a popular one, and yeah, I would say this is a fun one. I really, really love it. I think that this is the type of trend that I've noticed has gotten so popular, like videos that have this in the title get tons and tons of views, TikToks, BookTube, all of them. I think that authors are looking for a way to work that into their story, and I think this is where, for me personally, it gets a little bit like, I'm starting to not trust that when someone says it has Touch Her and You Die, because a lot of times it doesn't have the background in there to back up that the hero is like that, and I think that sometimes the author just sort of shoehorns that in there so they can market it like that. Not always, but I mean, again, we love a protective hero around here, so. Okay, now this one is wonderful. This is men being responsible for their own mental health. I love this so much. I love seeing books that have men that are responsible for their mental health and they're active about that. Like, they're either seeking out therapy, like Kennedy Ryan's Before I Let Go, or even Mile High by Liz Tom Ford. They're doing things where the men are actively seeking to improve their mental health. They're not relying on the heroine to sort of be their emotional security blanket, you know, which happens in life far too often. And I love seeing that happening in romance, and I love that it is sort of being loud about it. I want to see more, please. I love it very much. Okay, this one was the one that I really loved. The way Liz Tomford wrote Ryan Shea. I don't know if that counts, but I would need more of that. Like, same. That is the exact type of romance that I want there to be more of. And I know so many other people feel the same. So many of you watching this probably feel the same. When I read that book, The Right Move, for the first time, I was like, this is everything that I have been wanting in romance. Everything. And I need more of that. I absolutely agree. The way that he just loved her so much and was so thoughtful, how he could be both alpha and just very compassionate and sweet and concerned with her. Like, and that to me is the ultimate alpha. That's the true definition of an alpha. It's not just someone who takes or orders, you know. An alpha is someone who is powerful and strong and is going to take charge, but he's also going to absolutely make sure that his woman is taken care of, you know. So anyway, that's something that I also want to see more of. Vintage style covers, I also have seen that they have been returning. Love, 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 love them very much. Sometimes they're only returning as like special editions. I'm thinking about this Olivia Dade. It's kind of a nod to a vintage style cover, but I've also seen like this book by Scarlett Peckham. I feel like the font in this cover is very vintage, and I love that so much. So, monster romances. I'm not a monster romance girly personally, but I'm glad that y'all are having your heyday because good for you, you know? Indie authors getting so much love. That's true. I think, you know, when indie romance first like boomed, became a thing in like 2011, 2012, whenever that, around there when that happened, I felt like it was like everyone was reading indie romance. And then it seemed to take a back seat to maybe like YA with the rise of YA fantasy. And now I feel like we're seeing indie romance authors really shining again. So I love that. I love that they are getting more time. So okay, so now this one is an interesting one. It's not interesting because I know this is extremely popular, but no third act breakups. Those are my favorite trends. So I think that I probably have an unpopular opinion around here. I don't hate third act breakups at all. I actually kind of like them. Like, the whole point of reading a book or having a story is there's a problem that's going to be solved. Now, I will say that third act breakups that feel forced, I don't like those. You know, if it feels like this is just a conflict to split our couple up, to then make them get back together, so there's some type of conflict in there, that's a forced third act breakup. I don't think a third act breakup on its own is a bad thing, but it needs to feel like there's something that's leading us to this, like we know something's going to happen, we know that there's going to be a breakup. A third act breakup that comes out of nowhere, that feels like it's forced, that feels like it's in there just for conflict's sake, I don't like that at all, and I think that you all would agree with that as well. But, I mean, in general, I like my romances to have a good amount of conflict, and a lot of that I want it to be internal, because that's the kind of work that I'm interested in reading about, is the internal decisions, coming to terms with how you feel versus how another person feels, and you've got this love binding you together, but how do you work through these things, these issues? Like, yes, that's what I'm interested in. Okay, so this one was very fun. Sunshiny heroes, himbos, working class heroes. I love that. I really love that we are seeing a rise in working class heroes like cowboys or, you know, Elsie Silver. I think she's got a lot of working class heroes in there. I also love the sunshiny heroes. Absolutely. I think Abby Jimenez does a sunshiny hero really, really well. Also, I love this one, normalizing heroes who cry. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love to see our men in our romances showing a full range of emotions and not being afraid to show those and to have that on page. Love it. Love it so freaking much. So, all right, my friends, that is it. That's all that I have to talk about today for the best trends in romance according to you and my reactions to it. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, please feel free to leave me a purple heart, and I'll see y'all in my next one.